Hello, and welcome back to I Don't Imagine Anyone's Listening, the podcast where I talk about whatever it is that I want to talk about because I don't imagine that anyone's listening. I am your host, Monica Murray Durr, the one who's talking about whatever it is. Been away for a bit, not as long as last time, and I know I said last time, but I'm like, I'm gonna do this once a month, and I'm trying. I have a plan for the future, which will hopefully help me be in your ear holes on a semi-regular basis. If that's what you want for your ear holes, I can't demand that anyone listen. Anyway, so the plan is what I am calling my liturgical year of Tolkien, i.e. I have a lot of Tolkien books I have never read, and I want to read them, and I thought I would start by rereading The Hobbit, which I've read like a bajillion times because it's my favorite book, and also it happens to be Advent, which is the beginning of the liturgical year, so why the heck not? So today we're talking about The Hobbit. A little bit about the book, I mean largely about the book, but also in conjunction with the very strange 1977 cartoon version that was played on American television. It's bizarre. If you've never seen it, I recommend that you watch it. It is a mere 117 minutes. I'm sure you can find it somewhere on the internet. I believe if you shell out like $3 to YouTube, you can rent it. Or I'm sure there's other places you can find it where you don't have to pay, but you didn't hear that from me. Anyway, I happen to own the DVD because that is the kind of person that I am. So I rewatched it today after I finished the book last night. And is a strange film. It's got its pros and cons, especially compared to the, shall we say, sprawling Peter Jackson adaptation. So, which to be fair, I did kind of like those movies, but they're not perfect, mainly because it's 9 hours out of a 300-page book. That is its main flaw, is that it was stretched. Like the last movie is stupid long, and there's 50 pages of the book. That entire movie is 50 pages of the book, because the second film ends abruptly when Smaug flies off towards Lake Town. And when you're reading the book, you have 50 pages to go. So somehow that's a 3-hour movie. Yet the 117 minutes isn't quite long enough either. The biggest things that they left out of the cartoony version was there's no Beorn, who he's not like vital to the plot, but you know, it's not a lot. He's good. He gets his own chapter. He shows up at the end, killing orcs as a bear. Pretty cool. So I think he deserves to stay in, but anyway, so they leave him out, and then they also leave out the Arkenstone, which is kind of what drives the entire conflict of the end of the book, especially between Bilbo and Thorin. There's really no conflict in the cartoon version of the movie, which to be fair, they did the same thing, a similar thing anyway, in the Peter Jackson version, where there's a lot of like, it's just like very sort of heightened tension of Thorin doesn't think Bilbo should be there and blah blah blah, and they do like a very toned down version of that in the cartoon, especially at the end, but it's really unclear what they're fighting over at the end in the cartoon. Also, like, I'm assuming everyone has read this book. If you're listening to this and you haven't read this book, you're thoroughly confused. I have spoiled the ending, but it doesn't matter. This book came out in 1937. Go grab yourself a copy, give it a read, it's great. But since I'm talking about the book, let's talk about the book for a little bit. It's an interesting story because it is a children's book. But I realized, or I finally noticed for the first time rereading this as an adult, is that it's a children's book with no children in it. Like, if you think of most of the famous children's books, like not even just the newer ones like Harry Potter and Percy Jackson, and I'm sure there's many, many others that I don't know anything about. They're like The Secret Garden, and the only other one I can think of is Little Princess. I'm just stuck on Frances Hodges Burnett. Or like the Boxcar Children, or the Hardy Boys, or Nancy Drew, or like there's most children's books are about children. Like the protagonist is a child, and this one, the protagonist is a middle-aged man. Bilbo Baggins is 50 years old. To be fair, like, it's a whimsical story, and there's, you know, trolls and goblins and a big old dragon and elves, and it's the way that it's narrated is clearly someone telling a story to children, which is of course how it started, with Tolkien telling the story to his kids and all that. So like the tone of it is very much for children, but it's sort of unique in that it is not about a child, and there are no children in it. Like, I think the Lake Men have children, but like they're not really important to the plot. In the book, Bard doesn't have any kids, so he's just a dude with a bow and arrow, and that's like his whole thing. While we're on Bard, well, it's not really about Bard, but I know a lot of people didn't like in the Peter Jackson movies, they thought the sort of politics of Lake Town was a bit much, but it's in the book. The master's sort of lackey, I can't remember his name, but Unibrow, he's not in the book, obviously, but the master is a scheming political character, so I didn't mind that all that much. I thought all the time they spent with that Alfred, that's this character's name, they spent way too much time with him, and scheming politicians need lackeys, of course, but I thought we spent too much time with that one. Anyway, I didn't really want this to be a criticism of the Peter Jackson movies, because I do like them, and I can't imagine I have any criticism of them that hasn't been brought up about a bajillion times before. But I want to spend more time with this cartoon because I love it. It's ridiculous. But what's great about it is the music is awesome. I mean, not the like weird ballad that they have, the sort of greatest adventure. It's like their theme song. That's really goofy. But anytime they take like the songs that are in the book and they set them to music, they work really well, especially the goblins. Like, goblin music slaps. I don't know if I'm using that phrase correctly, but if I am, that's what it is. In the Peter Jackson version, the Goblin Town song is kind of a sea shanty, which, you know, it doesn't not work, but this one, it's much cooler. And then when they're riding on wolves and they're singing, was it 15 birds and 3 fir trees? I can't remember how many fir trees. When Gandalf and Bilbo and all of the dwarves are up in trees and catching things on fire, like, that's a great song. And a big reason for that is people who made this cartoon are Rankin Bass, known for Christmas television specials like Rudolph and those other ones with that weird claymation. So this one is 2D animation, and actually the animation studio that did it is a precursor to Studio Ghibli, which is interesting. If that's something you're into. I'm not, but it's just a fun fact. It's a very weird, very 70s thing, but it is sort of a interesting visual curiosity. But the music is great. And the songs in particular are a lot of fun. More people will probably know a song from, they did a sequel to this, and it's just Return of the King. It's called Where There's a Whip, Where There's a Way. I strongly encourage you to look it up if you don't know what I'm talking about. I don't really want to give you any context. Just search Return of the King, Where There's a Whip, There's a Way on YouTube, and you will not be disappointed. Sort of production design wise, there's a lot of stuff about this which is very strange, like what is going on with Bilbo's hair. All of the dwarves are identical, like to the point where I think one voice actor did like 8 out of 14 of them. You know, like there's not a lot of distinguishing features among them. Though, to be fair, Bomber's entire personality is being fat, which is straight out of the book, so there's not a lot more you can do with that one. The goblins are much scarier in this one. They have 2 throats, which is very weird, and big old teeth. The Goblin King is about to bite Thorin's head off, literally, when Gandalf swoops in and saves them. But when they first get captured by the goblins in the caves in the Misty Mountains, there's a shot where you're looking down the 2 throats of this goblin, and it's absolutely terrifying. So I kind of wish Peter Jackson had taken a page out of that book, because it was much scarier than Scrotum Beard. So yeah, there's that. No one wears pants also in this cartoon. They all have this like medieval like He-Man. All the men in Lake Town are wearing this sort of medievalish He-Man type of clothing. So no one's wearing pants. But then also same with the elves in Mirkwood. And the Mirkwood elves are really funny as well. They're kind of like evil French Keebler elves. It's very bizarre. The goblin, or not the Goblin King, the Elven King has a French accent, and he looks like a demented Keebler elf. Smaug is nowhere near as scary as the animated one, to be fair. He has, like, high beam eyes. Like, when Bilbo's invisible and talking to him, Smaug is staring at him, and he's just got these 2 beams of light that are searching around, it is from the book. You do have that image of light, like, coming out of Smaug's eyes, showing that he can, like, see everything. But when you recreate that as a cartoon, it is bizarre. His face is also weirdly cat-like. So that's also weird. Also, he seems to have fur. Like, it's very confusing. I don't understand who signed off on that dragon design. I would not have. But whatever. I didn't make this movie. I wasn't even born. This was 1977. Also, weirdly enough, this movie lost a Hugo Award to Star Wars. obviously Star Wars should have won it, but like that's what we're talking about. This is the world that this movie lived in. The 70s must have been a fun time. Ask your parents about it. They also kill off like 4 extra dwarves. It's weird. Because in the book, spoilers, the only people who die that we care about are Thorin, Fili, and Kili. That's another tricksy one, because in the book and in the movies, you obviously care about Thorin because he's quite important. And especially in the PJ movies, I thought they did a good job. Like, we get to know him. We really feel for him. And then, to be fair, Peter Jackson totally blew it with Fili and Kili, mainly because Fili should have been way more important. But we spent the entire time watching Kili try to bang an elf who's not in the book. There's no women in this book. None to be found. I'm sure the Lake Men have wives, and there's probably some girl elves knocking about, but there are no female characters in this book, and we're fine. It's fine. Calm down. We don't have to be in everything. It's okay. You know, you're still allowed to read things that you're not in. Yeah, so then in the cartoon, Fili and Kili stand out by being blonde. So, yep, and so I think Gandalf mentions, like, offhand that he dies, but then also he's like, oh, and Bomber died, as well as all these other people. And so Bilbo's like, well, how many of us are left? He goes, 6. We're like, what? So they killed off 4 extra dwarves for no reason. That is the weirdest change. Like, I understand cutting things, even though doesn't make any sense that they cut the Arkenstone, because that's very important. But just killing off extra dwarves doesn't make any sense. Also, in the cartoon, Dane just shows up. Like, he wasn't invited. Like, because in the book, Thorin sends birds or something to go tell him to come, but in this cartoon, he just appears. And also, everyone just appears, like, at the end. So, you know, Smaug flies off, and Bard kills him. And just like in the book, the dwarves are just chilling in the pile of treasure, and it's been weeks or whatever, and the dragon hasn't come back, and they're just like, whatever. Maybe he's dead. And then eventually they find out, and Bilbo, but in the book, you know, Bilbo steals the Arkenstone and sneaks off and blah, 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 blah. Obviously, it doesn't happen in the cartoon. So what happens in the cartoon is Bard just appears out of nowhere, and he's just like, hey, I killed the dragon, and the Lake Men made me their king, which in the book, he specifically chose not to become their king, even though he might have eventually, but whatever. So that's very strange. And then the Elven King is also there, and he's like, yeah, and we all want treasure. And then they just start fighting over treasure. And then the goblins show up, and they're like, no, we've been friends the whole time. Let's just team up and fight these goblins. And then there's eagles. And and that's it. And that's everything. They left out also my favorite part, which is Bilbo going home and his relatives stealing his spoons, and everyone being like, well, you're dead, so we're auctioning off your stuff. And then he has to buy back all his furniture. And Lobelia stole his spoons, which is good. It's good. It's good stuff. It's good details. So if you've noticed that I've been rambling for like 15 minutes and not really saying much of anything and just telling you about this cartoon, which if you haven't seen it, must be very boring. And if you have seen it, it's also probably pretty boring. But that's because it's hard to like nail down something that this book is about. Because it's an adventure story. It's a very good adventure story. As I say, it is my favorite book, but it doesn't really seem to have a lot to say other than this is an adventure, and I don't know, if you're comfortable in middle age, maybe take a dangerous walk for a year. I don't know. But I am going to read an excerpt from the book. Yeah, I have it right in front of me. Listen to those pages. Anyway. So it's on literally the last page. And I think if this book has a point to make, this might be the only one. And so, it's well after the fact. Bilbo's back at home. I think it might be a couple years later. Bilbo's at home, and Gandalf and Balin show up, and they have tea or dinner or whatever, and they're having a chat, good old chinwag. And so they're talking about the prophecies that said that the king under the mountain would return and claim his throne and his treasure and stuff. And so Bilbo says, then the prophecies of the old songs have turned out to be true after a fashion. And Gandalf replies, of course, and why should they not prove true? Surely you don't disbelieve the prophecies because you had a hand in bringing them about yourself. You don't really suppose, do you, that all your adventures and escapes were managed by mere luck, just for your sole benefit? If you're a Christian, but specifically Catholic, as Tolkien was, we will never stop reminding you of that, you will understand that is providence. Gandalf is talking about providence. That is a Christian doctrine, which is, it's not just fate, it's the hand of God in human history. So Gandalf is saying, yeah, all this stuff was supposed to happen. You just happened to be the instrument by which it occurred, which is even, theme becomes even more present in The Lord of the Rings, which obviously this kicks off because Bilbo finds the ring. Fun mention of Gollum in the cartoon. He's like this giant frogman who's like twice the size of Bilbo. It's very funny. Anyway, total aside, has nothing to do with anything. Also, if you want another weird Gollum, apparently there was like a totally not licensed of any kind Soviet version of Lord of the Rings, and that Gollum is wild. He looks like old Greg from The Mighty Boosh. If you don't know what that is, that reference doesn't mean anything to you, but it's worth looking up Soviet Gollum. That's pretty funny. But anyway, so and I don't, that's it. That's kind of like, if you're trying to find like this book is about, that's kind of the only thing that it's about, other than just sort of like, you know, finding it within yourself. Because of course at the beginning Bilbo's like, I'm just a domestic hobbit, I don't go out and do things, and then he goes out and does all the things. So there's like, you know, I'm sure you could find lots of boring modern believe in yourself kind of stuff, but I think the much more interesting one is, this is a very long way to explain Providence to your children. That's all I have to say about The Hobbit. I mean, I'm sure there's lots of more things I could say about it, but totally lost my train of thought, completely lost the plot very early on. Yeah, I have other notes that don't really have much to do with anything. So looking forward, I'm not sure what I'm going to read next for the Christmas season. It won't necessarily be tied into Christmas. The liturgical year thing is just sort of a framework for me to not fall behind too much. Also, last year during Lent, I read Lord of the Rings, and I'm like, maybe this could be a yearly thing. So that might be a yearly thing. I might check in with you periodically throughout Lent and be like, I'm reading Lord of the Rings again. Let me read you things that I didn't notice the first time. But between now and then, it's not Lent, it is Christmas, and then some ordinary time. So I will be reading other things, but by Tolkien, and then I will come blabber about them into this microphone, and then I will upload it for your listening enjoyment. So if you would like to join me on a journey, that's what we'll be doing, and occasionally I may throw in a bonus episode about other things. So watch this space. Is that still a thing people say? Alright, anyway, thank you for watching. You're not watching. Thank you for listening. All of my social media and other info is in the episode description. Okay, you can find me around the internet. Great. Cool. Bye-byes.